Hello my dear friends, my name is AK Rex, and as promised, we are going to do the largest theropods analysis. Now, please be considerate in the fact that I am not encouraging to take this for granted. It's just me here doing a bit of a funny exercise to demonstrate to you why saying certain things like Giganotosaurus was bigger than T-Rex or the other way around can be particularly unreliable in many cases, because you are not because a lot of these things, they come from very different samples, you see, because we have certain size of the sample for certain species than we do, or taxa, than we do for another, and therefore the accuracy of such estimates may be somewhat questionable at the very least. I want you to bear that in mind, and also don't be going completely crazy, because yes, I will be using one of the users from DeviantArt who is actually very good in demonstrating his methods when it comes to skeletal reconstructions. My only unfortunate problem with this is that, as far as I understand, he has never submitted his work for peer review, which I think he should do, and I will, by the way, bring him for an interview this upcoming weekend, so please post your comments below for the questions. I will leave the link to his profile in the description box, so you can check it out to see what he's done already and maybe come up with some questions that you would like to ask. And what I will do is I will try to compile them together, and I will feature them in an interview when we get to talk with him, and hopefully we'll edit and publish this as soon as possible. Now, with that in mind, let's get into it, shall we? So, I have taken whatever information I could find, mostly online, to be perfectly honest, because there's really nowhere else to find information, because the books tend to be a lot of times very vague and outdated or speculative. So I kind of tried to come up with what I could find over the internet, and I will include some of the sources, but mainly they were relying on reconstructions done by this guy, nicknamed Franois, and the other ones I used from, obviously, skeletal drawings by Scott Hartman. So, well, of course, few other things I have included in this as well, like I said, as I mentioned in the links. But the main point here to demonstrate is not how accurate my results are, it's mostly to do with how tricky it gets when it comes to determining who was the biggest, unless there is an obvious difference. So if you find certain problems in the numbers, don't take them too close to heart, as I do not intend for this to be taken as a gospel, and nor do I intend for this to be used as a reference. This is just for your own entertainment, and mostly just to get you an understanding of why this is a tricky topic. We will one day, maybe, hopefully, do a more professional analysis of sizes for dinosaurs and theropods, especially since I know that many people like to talk about theropod sizes. But for now, let's just grab drinks and enjoy, and just relax a little bit. So shall we? Now, with this one right here, you see this is the low-end and high-end estimates for the length that have been proposed and known this far. And as you can see, this is the table of top 10 that I could think of for the length that are included, and in conjunction with the mass, which will come up shortly. Now, I've taken the average of the length as well for each one of them, and this, obviously, sometimes the numbers are the same in both columns, so they will just come up with the same number. But some of them are not, so you will have a completely different number come up. And to my understanding, mostly they ring the truth. There's not much, to perhaps criticize there. There is, of course, like bits and pieces, but I don't think there's anything major that could be noticeable if you were to imagine this creature with these parameters visually to be manifested in real life. That's my point. Now, let's look at the other one, which is the mass. So, with the mass, we have this picture here. So once again, the same lineup of theropods, and they basically all, as you noticed, most of them, they have different estimates. So like, for example, Giganotosaurus was estimated to be at 6.8, while the 7.2 has also been given as the top one by Scott Hartman. So I thought, why not to include that as well, because this has also been, done as part of his work, and so I thought let's put that in as well. And Franois in particular has done the reconstructions for the mass for some of the theropods, mostly using the missing pieces from, to substitute from Giganotosaurus and from collective other Carcharodontosaurids. So therefore, Mapiosaurus, you will see, mostly has the same mass here. Although it may be not correct, but we don't know. Again, this is not the purpose of this demonstration. We're not trying to get it as accurate as possible. Of course we are, but we're not trying to claim sciency here. We are just trying to do this as an exercise to give you an understanding why this gets painful. So once I cover these bits here, I will then make some notes and points on where there were particular problems when it comes to doing the mass and sizes in general. Now, the next one is to basically to calculate how do we determine their position. So we have certain positions here in a grand total. Don't ignore the one on the very right at the moment. So look at the left columns here. So you see that top average in length, based on the average from the figures, are going a certain way, while some of them are sharing positions and some of them are, showing slightly difference. And note that the differences between some of them are particularly minor. They will be barely noticeable. So this is just for the sake of empirical analysis, not because visually you will probably not be able to notice quite a lot of these differences if you were to put the creatures up front in their sizes as they are presented here. So, for example, if you look at Giganotosaurus being 12 so it means that it's 12 meters and 30 centimeters in length, in contrast to Tyrannosaurus being 12 meters and 10 centimeters in length, so that means it's 20 centimeters of length difference. You will likely not notice it very much if you put these two together and, get them to move around as they naturally would do. They would practically look pretty much the same to you from a length perspective. Mostly, I would say mostly. Although Giganotosaurus would be considerably leaner, look leaner because it would be narrower than a wider and more robust T-Rex. So yes, maybe you would actually feel like Carcharodontosaurids are going to give you an impression that they are somewhat longer, relatively. And in mass as well, as you can see, there's position number 3 is shared by at least by 3 of them. And while the rest of them seem to be slowly descending, but not having that many extreme differences other than perhaps between Acrocanthosaurus and Therizinosaurus, when that's starting to get a bit more noticeable. Or you have 7 tons and say like 6.1 tons, particularly noticeable difference, probably even between Carcharodontosaurus, but I would probably say between Acrocanthosaurus, especially because it's almost 1 ton difference here between Giganotosaurus and that one. Between Tyrannosaurus, of course, anything that comes below 7 probably will become somewhat noticeable. Like say, for example, if you have maybe not even the Mapiosaurus, not position 3, but maybe position number 4 and downwards, that's going to be particularly noticeable next to a Tyrannosaurus when you talk about mass. Now, the way I decided to calculate this part in the column on the very right-hand side here is by taking the position that is being occupied by each theropod and taking the average. So, for example, if Spinosaurus has position number 1 in length and it's position number 3 in mass, then I take 1 plus 3, that will be 4, and then I will be dividing this by 2 to take the average. That comes down to 2. And some of the similar results have been achieved, as you can see, by other theropods, which means that the first position overall as the largest theropod is taken by Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus, according to my methods, at least. And then you can see the rest of the layout, and you can see that the last number 6 is shared by Therizinosaurus and Tarbosaurus, while the number 3 is shared by Acarcharodontosaurus and Tyrannotitan, while the rest of them are just scattered around a little bit. So you can see that a lot of times you will probably find that if you are going to dig into the idea of, like, okay, so on one hand this is heavier and this one is longer, but just based on this, their positioning in the chart, you can sometimes think, okay, so how do they go? So if you have something like a Giganotosaurus, which is both the second position in length and in mass, that's kind of closer to each other than, say, a Spinosaurus being number 1 in length and being number 3 in mass. So it's obviously giving you an idea that Spinosaurus was a very long and slender theropod, but it was not particularly heavy compared to, like, say, the other two that are beating it in the charts, like a Giganotosaurus or Tyrannosaurus. Does that make any sense? Okay, so to avoid rambling too much, let's just try to wrap it up. So to wrap up, we have number 1 for Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus, and Tyrannosaurus. They are the top place for the largest theropods, according to my analysis. Then you have Deinocheirus. Then you have number 3 shared by Carcharodontosaurus and Tyrannotitan. And then you have number 4 for Mapiosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus number 5, and number 6 shared by Tarbosaurus and Therizinosaurus. So this is my analysis. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you understand and can appreciate the fact that it's not that easy to compare who would be the largest if you have limited samples versus the ones that have a large sample. So for example, we have a very limited sample for Spinosaurus and Giganotosaurus in contrast to Tyrannosaurus. So just with that fact alone, the comparison is somewhat limited. So of course we go with what we know at present, but we have to acknowledge the fact that the comparison is not very fair. We're only comparing maybe 1 or 2 whatever individuals. Well, in the case of Giganotosaurus, it's a holotype. In case of Spinosaurus, it's the destroyed specimen, which doesn't have a lot of info preserved, but quite a bit significant info maybe. But we have another one from Ibrahim et al., and we use that somehow to reconstruct it, but this becomes very tricky, and with Giganotosaurus it's a holotype only. Then we have other ones that are not particularly reliable, like Carcharodontosaurus or Tyrannotitan. Mapiosaurus is considered relatively reliable because I believe there were several individuals that show a variety of different age groups. With Acrocanthosaurus we have only, I believe, 1 or 2 specimens, and one specimen in particular that was very well preserved, and I think that was also the type specimen, but I could be wrong. With Tarbosaurus we have quite a number of skeletons out there, and only a few of them were described in papers. However, the amount of them you can verify with maybe watching my interview with Philip Curie, where he tells you how many out there are just scattered around in quarries. There's just tons of them to still be dug up. So, and probably you would probably find quite a number with Therizinosaurus, but not quite as many, of course, I think. But in any case, the sampling and the of the specimens is important. So the more sample, the bigger the sample, the more accurate will be the comparison. So I hope that is something that you have also taken into account, because I surely have, and I can say for sure that many of you who might try to, obviously being very clear and unbiased here, try to apply certain methods of how you would go around calculating their masses and length, you would probably realize that it's not as easy as it seems at first to just take the numbers and put them together. It was a fun exercise, but I have to be honest with myself here. I cannot fully rely on it because A, we have unfair sample size for many of them. B, many of these figures may not be 100% correct. Because different people give different estimates, because even the surviving specimens that we have for some of them do not give us enough information to truly make our estimates reliable on a 100% basis. So we will obviously discuss this in more detail with Franois when he does the interview with me on the channel, and we will explain, hopefully be able to cover it in extensive video to explain why it's tricky and why it's important to make these little, to note these observations. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and also make sure you post your questions down below in the comments. You can ask me anything, literally. You don't have to feel like you might be asking me something inappropriate, because if I feel like it's not appropriate for me to answer, I will just ignore the question. So do not worry about doing anything like that, and don't worry about me, about being politically incorrect either. I don't care about all that nonsense. But in any case, but don't post the questions such as who do you think would win in a battle between this and this, because this is not really a Q&A thing about myself. This is more a topic about creature comparative series, which I will eventually start, I promise you. I'm just preparing some things for it, because I want this to be truly interesting. But in any case, post your questions as well, so I can do a nice Q&A video for it too. And let me know what else you would like me to do, what other videos you might be interested for me to make. I have resumed making the Isle videos. I will produce some shortly. If you want me to do more videos with games, specific games, if I can accommodate it, I will do it. So let me know what you guys want, and we shall get at it, hopefully, as soon as possible. So once again, thanks very much, and I will speak to you later. Take care now.